Hi guys, and welcome to HTP Storytime. When I was a much younger chunk of coal than I am now, I found a Reader's Digest compilation of short stories on my parents' bookshelf. After the first story I read, this book became one of my most treasured possessions. That first story is tonight's episode. It tells the story of a man who finds himself in need of employment and manages to land an office job at a factory sometime between 1945 and 1950. Even though when I read this story I was too young to have spent a single minute in gainful employment, the characters and the situations still resonated with me. As I became older and found myself in an office job, this short story took on yet another layer of meaning for me. So I invite you to be a fly on the wall as we step into Wunsiedal's factory where action will be taken. Let's go. Probably one of the strangest interludes in my life was the time I spent as an employee in Alfred Wunsiedal's factory. By nature I am inclined more to pensiveness and inactivity than to work, but now and again prolonged financial difficulties compel me to take on a so-called job, for pensiveness is no more profitable than inactivity. Finding myself once again at a low ebb of this kind, I put myself in the hands of the employment office and was sent with 7 other fellow sufferers to Wunsiedal's factory, where we were to undergo an aptitude test. The exterior of the factory was enough to arouse my suspicions. The factory was built entirely of glass brick, and my aversion to well-lit buildings and well-lit rooms is as strong as my aversion to work. I became even more suspicious when we were immediately served breakfast in the well-lit, cheerful coffee shop. Pretty waitresses brought us eggs and coffee, toast and orange juice, while goldfish pressed their bored faces against the sides of pale green aquariums. The waitresses appeared to be bursting with good cheer. Only a strong effort of will, so it seemed to me, restrained them from singing away all day long. They were as crammed with unsung songs as chickens with unlaid eggs. Right away I realized something that my fellow sufferers evidently failed to realize, that this breakfast was already part of the test. So I chewed away reverently, with the full appreciation of a person who knows he is supplying his body with valuable elements. I did something which normally no power on earth can make me do. I drank orange juice on an empty stomach, left the coffee and egg untouched, as well as most of the toast, got up and paced up and down in the coffee shop, pregnant with action. As a result, I was the first to be ushered into the room where the questionnaires were spread out on attractive tables. The walls were done in a shade of green that would have summoned the word delightful to the lips of interior decoration enthusiasts. The room appeared to be empty, and yet I was so sure of being observed that I behaved as someone pregnant with action behaves when he believes himself unobserved. I ripped my pen impatiently from my pocket, unscrewed the top, sat down at the nearest table, and pulled the questionnaire towards me, the way irritable customers snatch at the bill in a restaurant. Question number 1. Do you consider it right for a human being to possess only 2 arms, 2 legs, eyes, and ears? Here for the first time I reaped the harvest of my pensive nature, and wrote without hesitation, even 4 arms, legs, and ears would not be adequate for my driving energy. Human beings are very poorly equipped. Question number 2. How many telephones can you handle at one time? Here again the answer was as easy as simple arithmetic. When there are only 7 phones, I wrote, I get impatient. There have to be 9 before I feel I'm working to capacity. Question number 3. How do you spend your free time? I no longer acknowledge the term free time. On my 15th birthday, I eliminated it from my vocabulary, for in the beginning was the act. Let's just read that again, guys. I no longer acknowledge the term free time. On my 15th birthday, I eliminated it from my vocabulary, for in the beginning was the act. Damn, if only all of us could be this dedicated. Okay, let's go on. I got the I got the job. Even with 9 telephones, I really didn't feel I was working to capacity. I shouted into the mouthpieces, "Take immediate action," or "Do something. We must have some action. Action will be taken. Action has been taken. Action should be taken." But as a rule, I used the imperative. Of considerable interest were the noon-hour breaks, when we consumed nutritious foods in an atmosphere of silent good cheer. Wunsiedal's factory was swarming with people who were obsessed with telling you the story of their lives, as indeed vigorous personalities are fond of doing. The story of their lives is more important to them than their lives. You have only to press a button, and immediately it is covered with spewed-out exploits. Wunsiedal had a right-hand man called Broshek, who had in turn made a name for himself by supporting 7 children and a paralyzed wife by working night shifts in his student days and successfully carrying on 4 business agencies, besides which he had passed 2 examinations with honors in 2 years. Wow. When asked by reporters, "When do you sleep, Mr. Broshek?" he had replied, "It is a crime to sleep." Wunsiedal's secretary had also supported a paralyzed husband and 4 children by knitting, at the same time graduating in psychology and German history, as well as breeding shepherd dogs, and she had become famous as a nightclub singer, where she was known as Vamp Number 7. Wunsiedal himself was one of those people who every morning as they open their eyes make up their minds to act. I must act, they think, as they briskly tie their bathrobe belts around them. I must act, they think, as they shave, triumphantly watching their beard hairs being washed away with the lather. The more intimate functions also give these people a sense of satisfaction. Water swishes, paper is used, action has been taken, bread gets eaten, eggs are decapitated. With Wunsiedal, the most trivial activity looked like action. The way he put on his hat, the way, quivering with energy, he buttoned up his overcoat, the kiss he gave his wife, everything was action. When he arrived at his office, he greeted his secretary with a cry of, "Let's have some action," and in ringing tones she would call back, "Action will be taken." Wunsiedal then went from department to department, calling out his cheerful, "Let's have some action." Everyone would answer, "Action will be taken," and I would call back to him too with a radiant smile when he looked into my office, "Action will be taken." Within a week, I'd increased the number of telephones on my desk to 11, within 2 weeks to 13, and every morning I enjoyed chasing the words "take action" through various tenses and modulations. For 2 whole days, I kept saying the same sentence over and over again because I thought it sounded so marvelous. Action ought to have been taken. For another 2 days, it was such action ought not have been taken. So I was really beginning to feel I was working to capacity when there was actually some action. One Tuesday morning, I had hardly settled down at my desk when Wunsiedal rushed into my office crying his "Let's have some action," but an inexplicable something in his face made me hesitate to reply. In a cheerful gay voice, as the rules dictated, "Action will be taken." I must have paused too long, for Wunsiedal, who seldom raised his voice, shouted at me, "Answer, answer, you know the rules." And I answered under my breath, reluctantly. It was only by a great effort that I managed to bring out the sentence, "Action will be taken." And hardly had I uttered it, when there really was some action, when Wunsiedal dropped to the floor. As he fell, he rolled over onto his side and lay right across the open doorway. I knew at once, and I confirmed it when I went slowly around my desk and approached the body on the floor. He was dead. Shaking my head, I stepped over Wunsiedal, walked slowly along the corridor to Broshek's office, and entered without knocking. Broshek was at his desk, a telephone receiver in each hand, between his teeth a ballpoint pen with which he was making notes on a pad, while with his bare feet he was operating a knitting machine under the desk. In this way he helped to clothe his family. "We've had some action," I said in a low voice. Broshek spat out the ballpoint pen, put down the two receivers, reluctantly detached his toes from the knitting machine. "What action?" he asked. "Wunsiedal is dead," I said. "No," said Broshek. "Yes," I said. "Come and have a look." No, said Broshek. "That's impossible." But he put on his slippers and followed me along the doorway. "No," he said, when we stood beside Wunsiedal's corpse. "No, no." I did not contradict him. I carefully turned Wunsiedal over onto his back, closed his eyes, and looked at him pensively. I felt something like tenderness for him, and realized for the first time that I had never hated him. On his face was that expression which one sees on a child who obstinately refuses to give up their faith in Santa Claus, even though the arguments of their playmates sound so convincing. "No," said Broshek, "no. We must take action," I said quietly to Broshek. "Yes," said Broshek, "we must take action." Action was taken. Wunsiedal was buried, and I was delegated to carry a wreath of artificial roses behind his coffin. For I am equipped not only with a penchant for pensiveness and inactivity, but also a face and figure that go extremely well with dark suits. Apparently, as I walked along behind Wunsiedal's coffin, I looked superb. I received an offer from a fashionable firm of funeral directors to join their staff as a professional mourner. "You are a born mourner," said the manager. "Your outfit would be provided by the firm, your face simply superb." I handed in my notice to Broshek, explaining that I had never really felt I was working to capacity there. As soon as my first professional appearance as a mourner was over, I knew this is where I belong. This is what I am cut out for. Pensively I stand behind the coffin in the funeral chapel, holding a simple bouquet, while the organ plays Handel's Largo, a piece that does not receive nearly the respect it deserves. The cemetery cafe is my regular haunt. There I spend the intervals between my professional engagements, although sometimes I walk behind coffins which I have not been engaged to follow. I pay for flowers out of my own pocket and join the welfare worker who walks behind the coffin of some homeless person. From time to time I also visit Wunsiedal's grave, for after all, I owe it to him that I discovered my true vocation. It was not till much later that I realized I had never bothered to find out what was being produced in Wunsiedal's factory. I expect it was so